This is Bruce Buffer, and this is the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time for the MMA-Holes!
Mixed martial a-holes. MMA-Holes, 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 MMA-Holes. You like to be a mixed martial a-hole. MMA-Holes, 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 MMA-Holes.
No way.
From the Queen Studios of New York, live with the MMA-Holes community for UFC Mexico City Fight Briefing with the MMA-Holes. What's up, guys? Welcome. Oh, I gotta do this. Ready? Welcome to
Fight Briefing.
Tonight we're going to be discussing UFC Mexico City that's going to be happening this weekend. Rodriguez versus Stevens is the main event. I still have a little bit of my drink from the last show, so cheers to the entire MMA-Holes community. This is an exciting card. I think a lot of people are a little down on this card because we've got some fighters here that are kind of unrecognizable names. This will be the 5th time that the UFC is going to hold a show in Mexico City. But we do have a lot of exciting fights on the card, so I'm pretty stoked to talk about it, particularly on the main card, which is what we're going to be covering tonight. Now, like I said, keep in mind, there's a lot of names on the main card that may not be of value per se, but that does not mean that they're not great brawlers. It doesn't mean they're not great, on the ground or whatever. But most importantly, they're extremely good prospects. So I'm pretty excited to talk about it. So hopefully we'll be in for a night full of fun fights this weekend. So let's get started on
Fight Briefing.
Welcome to the chat. Khabib Goat, Pixelated Vigo, Miguelito Dominguez, Jean Pinkard says, keep in mind. That's right. Keep in mind. Willie James Huff, Miguelito Dominguez again, Flat Earth Deacon, and 2 joins. All right. Now we're going to get into the first fight almost instantaneously, but before we do that, I want to show you guys the fights that are going to be on the card tonight. I mean, not tonight, this weekend. So we have Martin Bravo versus Steven Peterson is going to be the first fight on the main card, followed by Irene Aldana versus Vanessa Melo. I do have to warn you guys, there are more female fights on this main card than I think we're used to seeing, so, bear with them. Brandon Moreno versus Askarov, Carla Esparza versus Alexa Grasso, and of course the main event is Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stevens. So, how many of you guys, with the ones in the chat, are excited to see the breakdown and predictions to make your bets on the main card of the night? Gene Pinkard says, thanks JBH, Boss Kogar, 2 joins. I don't know that dickhead. 2 joins says it's the news, faggots. Well, it's not really the news, but it is the fight briefing. So, yeah. Since it is a fight briefing, let's get into the first fight of the card. Martin Bravo versus Steven Peterson is the first fight of the main card. Now, Bravo is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. His record is 11-2-0. And What's interesting about this fight is both of these two fighters, their last fight was against Alex Caceres, and they both lost. The only difference is Bravo lost via split decision, and Peterson lost via unanimous decision. So that's pretty much the only difference. They both lost to the same guy. So I think that's what makes for an interesting fight here, and it's a smart matchup, I think. As far as Bravo's concerned, it's a little weird, his career, I think. He was the winner of the Tough Latin America 3, which took place in 2016. He won the fight against a guy named Claudio Puelles, which was honestly great for him, but ever since then, he's sort of been on a downward spiral in his career. We've only seen him fight twice, and he lost both of them. And when I say twice, I mean he literally managed to fight once per year in the years following that tough fight, which I think makes it a little difficult to sort of root for him in this fight. And if that's not enough, we also have to take into account that one of those fights was a knockout by Humberto Bandone. That was a knockout fight, so we know that Bravo doesn't really have that chin on him. The other, as I previously mentioned, was Alex Caceres, and I don't think anyone can argue that he was losing the beginning of the fight, because he was losing the beginning of the fight. Now, Caceres did give him quite a beating in the beginning of the fight, but I think what sort of made the turnaround was when Bravo sort of came back in the later half of that round, and that's what kind of gave him that split decision. But ultimately, he still lost, and that fight did go to Caceres. But Bravo is a tough fighter. Regardless of the losses he took and how he took those losses, he's still a tough fighter, evidenced by what we've seen so far. The problem is, like I said, we've seen Bandone show that Bravo can be knocked out, which could be a huge problem against someone like Peterson, who's a huge brawler. So I feel that makes it also rather difficult to identify how good he actually is, because we haven't really seen him or much of him or enough of him inside the cage. And when we have seen him inside the cage, it hasn't been his best performances. So regardless, I think if a brawl is what Bravo's looking for, then he's definitely going to get it out of Peterson. I don't think it's going to be what he's expecting. So let's talk about Peterson for a minute. Peterson is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. His current record is 17-9-0, and like I said, his last fight was also to Alex Caceres. He lost via unanimous decision. Now, Peterson did join the UFC in early 2018, but before that, he was he auditioned for Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he lost, unfortunately. Wah, wah. After that fight, though, he did take up a fight with LFA. He left that. He took up a fight with LFA where he won, and then he came back to the UFC, and he took another loss to Brandon Davis. And then, of course, he fought Matt Bessette right after that, a friend of the show, at the Tough 27 finale. And I think, needless to say, since his Contender Series, he's gone 1-3 in the octagon, so more losses than wins. And to me, I think with a record like that, it's a little surprising to see him still in the UFC, right? To see him be kept around. But I think one of the reasons that the UFC does keep him around is because his kind of fighting style is sort of what the UFC likes to hone in on, because it's something that is sellable, something marketable, right? So he comes forward swinging no matter what. I think it makes him a rather exciting fighter. And most recently, we did see him get beaten by Luis Pena, and as I mentioned, Alex Caceres, but they were close fights. Now, the Alex Caceres fight, some have argued that he did beat Caceres in that fight. I'm not really sure. But when it comes to the Pena fight, absolutely no one can argue that he lost. He lost that fight 100%. He is a brawler, like I said.
Super chat.
Super chat.
Keep up the great work, JBH.
Juvenile Johnny! Yes! Thank you. I will keep up the great work, Juvenile Johnny, by talking about how much of a brawler Peterson is. I do think that the fact that he is a brawler could be dangerous for Bravo. Now, Bravo likes to look for brawlers, but he's not as proficient in brawling himself. So I think that's where Peterson could be a little more dangerous for Bravo. And I also think that Peterson's also fairly well-rounded, right? He's good on the ground. He likes to attack with a submission game. He's got a lot of power behind his punches. And I think that if he utilizes all those skills and he utilizes them strategically, then he could have that advantage to take out Bravo in this round. So bottom line for this fight, guys, I think we should expect a brawl coming out of it. Like I said, like 5 million times in this. I think it's going to be heavy striking. Hopefully we get to see some blood out of it. I think it's going to be incredible amounts of pressure. Peterson. Whoa.
You know, I just feel so
Roberto.
special. I've got a special face. Attention is short, bust to outer space. Mine in a special place.
Roberto.
GSP abducted me. I'm from an alien race. Special face. Special face. Special face.
Roberto Hernandez.
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you, Roberto. Tune in, guys, every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We went a little late tonight because of the press conference, but thank you, Roberto. I really appreciate it. Getting back to the bottom line of this fight, I do think now we know Bravo has a little bit of a home field advantage here, and that could aid him a little bit, maybe, add some of that influence into his fighting. He does look for brawls, like I said, but he doesn't always execute those brawls in the smartest way. And Peterson can do that, if he takes a step back and he understands his opponent. So I don't think it's any surprise here that I'm going to go with Peterson in this fight. And it could very well go the distance. I'm not sure if we're going to see any sort of knockouts or finishes here, but, anything's possible, like I like to say. But I think this one could very well go the distance. So that is who I have for Martin Bravo versus Peterson. Let me know who you guys have in the chat. And while you do that, I'm gonna take this off. There we go. Martin Bravo versus Peterson. Let me know who you guys have in the chat. All right. Chidron says Moss doesn't know how to run the dishwasher. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Don't say that. Peterson is a regional level fighter. Bravo for the win, and bravo on your picks last week, JBH, says Burnman. Drunk Savage says Eddie Bravo. Gene Pinkard. Canelo on the same night as UFC 244 is absurd. Gadsden, Alabama. I'm with you, JBH, says CC 2.0. Bob's Bravo, what up? 312 Vandal. Can he fly? Says Cocoa Butt. CC 2.0, please recap after so I can write your picks down. I will.
You can't stop
Whoa.
the Siberian Express. Choo-choo, motherfuckers.
Dick Trickle.
Question but not about UFC Mexico. What on your thoughts on Cormier v Miocic Part 3 now that it's official? Also, your bosoms look ample sorta like they are carrying milk. Is there some news you want to share?
No.
But yeah, Cormier v Type 3 thoughts?
All right. So before you get into those theories, no, there is no news that needs to be shared. Thank God. But Cormier Miocic, I didn't even know that was official. Are you trolling me right now? I had no idea that was official. If it is, if you're not trolling, and it is official, I said before I wasn't really down for it. I would have much rather see Jones go up to heavyweight and fight Cormier. I think that would have been a better business move by the UFC and a better business move for Cormier, given that he's on the verge of retirement right now. I'm kind of surprised if that even does happen, but I don't like it. Like they're exciting fighters. I'm not as into it as if DC were to fight Jones. But it is what it is. I mean, it's still a great fight, and I can't really shit on it too much. But I would have DC for the win all day. 100%. All right, guys. Let's get into the next fight over here. The second fight on the card is Irene Aldana versus Vanessa Melo. Another women's fight. Now, you guys know where I stand when it comes to WMMA. I'm not always the biggest fan because I think a lot of WMMA fights are sometimes difficult to watch because a lot of times they go the distance. We see a lot of hugging, and even if they're striking, we don't see very many finishes, and there's just not a lot of pizzazz in a women's fight. Now, that's not to say there aren't great women's fighters. There's fantastic. Shevchenko, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Rose Namajunas, and that's just to name a few. Amanda Nunes. I mean, there's some great, very strategic, very technical fighters in the women's divisions. I just personally don't really take to them too much. But I did take the time to break down these fights because they are on the main card. So we'll start with Irene Aldana. Irene Aldana is on a 1-fight losing streak. Yikes. She has a pro MMA record of 10-5-0, and she last fought against Raquel Pennington on July 20th of this year. Now, she did lose via split decision. Initially, for this fight, Aldana was supposed to fight Marion Renault, but Renault had to pull out for undisclosed reasons. We don't really know why. So now she's fighting Vanessa Melo. Now, Aldana is one of the more exciting fighters in the women's bantamweight division, so that's why I'm kind of giving this fight a little bit of a chance here. She's a super aggressive striker. We've all seen that from her. She loves using tough combinations on her opponents. She's got a huge speed advantage, and she knows that those things work really well for her, and she's used them against her opponents before, and they've always aided her, except for this last fight, of course, against Raquel Pennington. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that she has won the Fight of the Night award twice in her UFC career.
Super chat.
Zach Clashing.
Love the channel and I love watching you so much.
And I love speaking to you so much, Zach. Thank you. Thank you. Nobody else got that. Only Zach Clashing got that. So another thing to keep in mind about Aldana, like I said, she did get the Fight of the Night award twice in her UFC career. And as far as weaknesses are concerned with Aldana, the only thing I can really think about is her ground game. It's not that she's bad on the ground. You know, she did submit Betch Correa by armbar. And she seemed to be able to sort of handle her own against Raquel Pennington, even though she lost that fight. But she really doesn't have the best takedown defense. And I think that this could be a little worrying against Melo, but not too worrying because, and I'll tell you why. Melo she's on a 5-fight winning streak. And her record is 10-5-0. Her last fight was against Jan Finney, via unanimous decision in BFC, not UFC. So, this is her UFC debut, Melo. Also, we have to remember that she's been brought in around a 2 weeks notice. So, short notice, UFC debut, not a very exciting fighter. And I know, it just makes it a little easier to pick for me, just for this fight. Not for a lot of other fights. There have been multiple other fights in the past where I've picked the UFC debut guy. Tristan Connolly I just picked last week, and I can hang my hat on that one that I picked Tristan Connolly last week, and that was his UFC debut, and he won. So, you know, it's not that I'm opposed to picking fighters who come in on a UFC debut, but this one in particular, I think I've seen some clips of Melo. I'll put it this way. I'm not very impressed. I'm not very impressed in her by all. You could argue that, she's on a 5-fight winning streak, and you're right. She is.
Super chat.
Harvey.
JBH. I just saved more money on my car insurance.
Woo!
Smiley face.
Yes! Harvey Weinstein saved more money on his car insurance. Cheers.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Did you switch to Geico, Harvey? All right. So, like I said, you could argue that she is on a 5-fight winning streak, and she is on a 5-fight winning streak. She appears to be a decent striker. Super chat. Presence.
Because JBH is here.
You know what? Because presence is here. All right. Melo, it does appear to be a pretty decent striker. Her grappling is decent. But to me, she's like all the other WMMA fights that we've seen that sort of go the distance and run to a decision every single time without any super exciting things to see in the fight. Now, I will agree one of the sources that I researched on Melo said that the fact that she has gone the distance in her last 6 fights, going split decision on 3 of them, yes, that says a lot about her fighting style. And I 100% agree with that. Now, she did win against Molly McCann, but here's the thing. That was way back in 2015. It wasn't even a UFC bout. It was a decision win. Shocker. That seems to be something that Melo is good at. And McCann is a natural at flyweight. Then she took an L for her fight right after that. So I think bottom line for this fight, I truly believe we're going to see Aldana's speed. I think we're going to see the power come forward over Melo. Aldana has the ability to run Melo down, to overwork her, to wear her out, even possibly hurt her in the beginning, and then really move forward from there with the rest of her skills. So with that being said, I don't know if we're going to see a finish here. Probably not. I mean, this is WMMA fight. It's not Shevchenko fighting or anything like that. So, but I do think that this fight will easily lean in Aldana's favor. So my pick for this fight is going to be Irene Aldana. Let me know who you guys have in the chat for Aldana versus Melo. All right. Khabib Goat says it was not an accident. Henry Soul says the ladies do not show up on BetDSI. No. Staley02 says pixelated Vigo. Burnman says you died a little inside when making that analysis, and so did your unborn child from the stress. Yeah, listen, it's never easy making an analysis on a women's fight, but sometimes if you get some good brawlers in there, it's easy to make that analysis. Khabib Goat says Aldana needs JBH silicone doctor. What? Roulette Master JBH, you would great as a redhead, Scarlett Johansson style. You know what's funny? I said that to Moss one time, and he told me no. He doesn't want red hair. I can't think of anything good to comment, says Boss Kogar. Talk about Alexa Grasso. She is a nice piece of ass. Willie James Huff says women should stay in the kitchen, not the octagon, making delicious sandwiches. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We have Brandon Moreno versus Askarov. Moreno versus Askarov. Now, thanks to the UFC for not putting these fighters' pictures on the website, so I had to improvise and put in some pictures of my own, but listen, I'm good at what I do. Let's talk about Moreno versus Askarov. Moreno is currently on a 1-fight winning streak. His last fight was against Michael Perez. He won by a knockout in the 4th round at LFA. His pro MMA record is 15-5-0. Now, a website that I was studying on Moreno said in the best way possible, they said that the UFC career for Brandon Moreno is fascinating because of the way that he's been treated. And I thought that really stuck out to me, the way that they said that. After careful research of Moreno, I'd be an idiot not to agree with them. Moreno was another Tough alumni. He's from Tough 24. And when he was slingshot into the UFC after Tough, he went on a 3-fight win streak, right? And I think that threw everyone for a little bit of a loop. People were high on this kid for a really long time. And during that skid, out of nowhere, he goes and fights against Sergio Pettis and Alexandra Pantoja, and he takes a loss to both fighters. Now, granted, these were 2 rather high-level contenders in the flyweight division for him, so that does kind of, not aid Moreno in this, but at the same time, it did cause him to get released from his UFC contracts. Now, he was a ranked top 10 contender when he was released from the UFC, so a lot of people believed that was sort of the UFC's way of, they were starting to eliminate that 125-pound division. But then Moreno re-signed with the UFC earlier this year, so this fight that's going to happen this weekend is actually going to be his return. He does have a home field advantage for this fight, and I think that this fight alone could put some promise in the 125-pound division altogether. I saw Heavy Micro asking, what's with the belt? So the UFC didn't provide Askarov's picture, so I had to improvise and put the only picture I could find of Askarov. That was a PNG in there. All right, moving on. Speaking of Askarov, he is on a 10-fight winning streak, and I know that Mystic Moss was talking about the betting odds and how Moreno was the under, and maybe some people should put money on the under here. I am telling you right now, this is a guaranteed pick. Do not put your money on Moreno as an under. Don't do it. That will be the biggest mistake you make. Do not do it. When it comes to Askarov, this is his UFC debut, and I know I'm notorious for picking a UFC debut fighter. Sometimes not so much. I always feel it's a little risky to pick a guy making a UFC debut when they're fighting an opponent who's been well off in the UFC or in the cage for a little while in the past. But at the same time, look at Tristan Connolly back at the fights last weekend. I can hang my hat on that one, and after picking him on, and he won, I have a very strong itching feeling that Askarov's going to take the win here, and I'll tell you why. First of all, he's yet another fighter coming out of Dagestan, and we've seen that almost every fighter that comes out of Dagestan is a fucking monster. And they haven't really given us a reason to doubt their skills inside the cage yet. At all, really. If you look at his track record, he's a complete beast. He's undefeated, and he's never gone the distance in any of his fights.
You can't stop the Siberian Express. Choo-choo, motherfuckers.
Dapper Dave.
Khabib versus Ferguson. JBH. I want you to remember this and say it to MOS.
Okay.
Ferguson will be reckless with his elbows, get taken down by Khabib. He will then trap his legs with his legs, making Ferguson ground game on his back ineffective, and he will tap out.
All right, I will be sure to let Moss know what you said. I'm sure I'll go back and watch this at some point and, to take notes, and I'll make sure I let Moss know. As far as Askarov is concerned, like I said, he's an undefeated fighter, and he's never gone the distance in any of his fights. And not only that, not only has he finished all of his fights, he's finished all of his fights as a completely well-rounded fighter on the ground and on the feet. The guy has incredible power behind his striking. He's fantastic on the ground. He's submitted a lot of his opponents on the ground too. And something else to remember is all of his opponents in the past have been Russian prospects. These are not just cans that they're handing Askarov. Askarov is fighting some pretty high-level fighters, and he's taking them out. He's just picking them off one by one. And they've all been complete monsters, and he just completely finishes them. So he does have a tendency to walk his opponents down with the power behind his punch. And I had made mention of that before, which I love. I love that. I love when a fighter can walk an opponent down and sort of wear them down in the beginning and then just attack them out of nowhere, whether it's on the ground or on the feet. I love that. So bottom line of this entire fight. Now, I'm not saying Moreno is not a good fighter. That's not what I'm saying at all. He's a great fighter. He's very well-rounded. He's got some decent striking. He can handle himself on the ground. Against most of his opponents. I just don't think that this opponent in Askarov is going to be one that he can handle.
You can't stop the Siberian Express. Choo-choo, motherfuckers.
Roberto!
Jeremy Stevens gave a really good interview. I guess his wife is Mexican. He's saying he's going to embarrass Yair by fucking him up really bad. You think he's overconfident, or he's really going to win easy?
So it's a good question. I'm actually going to let you know. I think we got 2 more fights to go through, and I will let you know. But it's funny you say that because I will talk about it. Right now we are on Moreno versus Askarov, and I'm finishing up this one. I don't think that Askarov as an opponent for Moreno is going to be someone that Moreno can handle on the ground. I believe there's a little bit too much of an advantage for Askarov here, given his skills inside the cage, given what we've seen on his track record in the past. And overall, I feel Askarov is going to run Moreno over. I think that he should be someone that we should really pay attention to in this division, because he could be the next, sort of king of the 125 division. And for everyone who thought that the 125 division was going to go out, including myself, this should be someone that even Henry Cejudo should be looking out for. So keep your eyes on Askarov. My pick is going to be Askarov for this fight. 100%. He's going to win this one. Let me know who you guys have in the chat. All right. Chris Wolf says Tony will at least bust his face open. Roberto Hernandez says, oh yeah, I forgot. LOL. All right. Khabib Goat, Moreno is no joke. I would also pick Askarov, but Moreno is legit, and I agree. Like I said, I'm not saying Moreno's a bad fighter. I think he's a great fighter. I think he can handle himself. I just feel that Askarov is really going to take the advantage here. All right. Now let's move on to the next fight. Carla Esparza versus Alexa Grasso. I almost missed that rolled R there. Did you see that? All right. So Carla Esparza versus, I just heard Alexa go off and I got all distracted. Alexa Grasso is currently, Carla Esparza is currently on a 1-fight winning streak. Her pro MMA record is 14-6-0, and her last fight was in April of this year against Virna Jandiroba. She won via unanimous decision. Now, how many of you guys remember Carla Esparza in Tough? I'd love to see the ones in the chat if you remember Carla. If you don't, let me just give you a quick rundown of how she made it into the UFC. She beat some pretty decent names, actually, in the coming of her strawweight championship. Angela Hill, Tisha Torres, I believe, or Tisha Tomato Can Torres, or Tiny Tomato Can, or whatever Moss likes to call her, Jessica Pena, and even your most beloved Rose Namajunas. For those of you guys who are so high on her, we did see her beat Rose Namajunas in that fight. Now, it seemed like Esparza's excellent wrestling and submission game would actually make her a super dominant champion, but then Joanna Jędrzejczyk happened, and she was defeated, and her title, or defending her title, and Joanna just completely destroyed her. Like, it was tough to watch. Now, to be honest, I really don't think that Esparza ever truly bounced back from that. She's a pretty impressive fighter. I'm not gonna lie, she's extremely impressive. She stopped Cynthia Cavillo. There was a controversial win over Claudia Gadelha. I don't know how many of you guys remember that. In fact, she actually accused Claudia Gadelha of greasing during that fight. I remember the reaction to that fight, and some of us actually, including myself, thought that Esparza won that fight. But Claudia Gadelha, for some really bizarre reason, ended up taking the win. But now, Esparza also has 3 losses, and I feel like the time is from the time of Esparza when we got to see her prior to Jędrzejczyk, it's sort of not really existent anymore. That type of Esparza that we got to see. You know, her striking isn't as good as it was when she was in Tough, and to top it all off, honestly, I feel like she went and fought Tatiana Suarez, and then Suarez practically destroyed her using her own type of wrestling style. So what kind of Esparza do we really have here, right? Now, she is fighting Grasso, who's currently on a 1-fight winning streak, 11-2-0, and her last fight was against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, an impressive win for Grasso. In fact, she coming off of that fight, it was probably one of the more impressive wins of her career. Now, some could argue that Karolina Kowalkiewicz was falling out of her prime. It's not the same Karolina that we've seen before, and that's how Grasso got the win. Whatever you might think, she still took the win, and it was a pretty impressive fight. I think she's sort of similar in spirit to Esparza, though, when it comes to the highs and lows of her progress in the UFC. When she first came in, there was like a lot of hype around her, like an unusual amount of hype around her, right? Especially given that it was relatively difficult for women's MMA to sort of take to UFC fans. In fact, it hasn't really even taken to me yet. But she did fight Heather Jo Clark and outstruck her, created a name for herself almost simultaneously, or instantaneously, sorry. And then she goes and fights Felice Herrig, right? Who a lot of people sort of doubted in that fight. And then Herrig completely outworked Grasso. Completely outworked her. Since then, she's beaten 2 of 3 opponents, and she was defeated by Suarez. So something her and Esparza have in common is fighting Tatiana Suarez and both losing to Suarez. She almost missed weight once before. We know that missing weight sometimes means that a fighter's discipline isn't exactly up to par. Another thing is that she has had quite a few injuries, and to put the cherry on top, she's had a knee surgery as well. So all of this stuff accumulated could have really slowed Grasso down. But where I give Grasso a little bit of an advantage is she's only 26 years old, guys. She's just leading into her prime. She's coming off of one of the best fights of her career with Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So I think bottom line for this fight, I feel that Grasso's, like I said, she's just now reaching her prime. Esparza, she hasn't really left her prime. She's only 31 years old, but she's already sort of progressed through that moment in her career. Esparza is definitely going to come after Grasso with some takedowns, I feel, and some ground game, and because she knows that that's where Grasso's weakness might be. I think if Grasso can defend them early on, and then based on how she handled Kovalevich on the feet, I think she can probably unleash some pretty impressive striking, maybe some combinations, some memorable combinations of that. I mean, maybe she'll even stop Esparza. I don't really see her stopping Esparza, but I think that if she puts enough into it and keeps herself on the feet, the only thing she's going to have to do, though, like I said, is she can't get to the ground. She has to stay on the feet. The moment Esparza gets her to the ground, I think Grasso's going to be fucked. But my pick for this one is going to be Grasso, so long as she can keep herself on the feet. Let me know what you guys have in the chat. Alexa Grasso or Carla Esparza. I got to be honest, that was a tough one to pick because I think Esparza has a lot behind her, and I think it's almost a little unfair to not choose Esparza in this fight, but I just feel Alexa Grasso might have something up her sleeve that maybe we're not really catching here. So let me know who you guys have in the chat. Brian Young says, Birdman, thank you. I will try that. Big Bread laughing in the chat. Irregardless says, Grasso 55%. Tim F. Cookie Monster is so cute in a gremlin kind of way. Post-resurrected, y'all gotta admit her knowledge of striking and fighting nuance has improved by leaps and bounds. Drunk Savage Heart says, Grasso, but Head says Carla. Dapper Dave, Yair Rodriguez, Conor McGregor, and Israel Adesanya, all overrated fighters. Once on the ground, cannot do anything. Jonas G. Grasso. Kainoto74 says, upset, Cookie Monster with the win. Dylan Darker, Grasso got this. Gene Pinkard, eye poking. Stalio 2, alien sound effect. Grasso for the win. All right, guys. Now here we go. It is the main event of
the evening.
All right, guys. The main event of the evening, Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stevens. Drop the ones in the chat if you're excited for this fight. Drop the twos if you could give a fuck. I'm kind of excited for it. I'm not going to lie. I'm actually pretty excited for this one. Rodriguez is on a one-fight winning streak right now. His pro MMA record is 11-2-0. And according to Tapology, his last fight was November 10th in the UFC against none other than the Korean Zombie, or Chan Sung Jung, if you want to call it that. Now, if you watched this fight, and I'm seeing the ones coming now, a lot of people more excited. Some people kind of excited. Some people just could give a fuck. Yeah, we're already in the main event, Birdman. I think this card's going to be pretty exciting. But back to the Korean Zombie fight, if you guys remember seeing that, it was a 1-second knockout. And a lot of people argue that Korean was winning that fight, and I kind of agree. And it was, I don't know if it was by sheer luck or sheer happenstance, or maybe he just planned it, but literally in the final second of the final round, Rodriguez knocks out the Korean Zombie by elbow, with a spinning elbow. And I think it was thank you, Drunk Savage. I think that was probably one of the most memorable moments in Yair Rodriguez's career, was when we got to see him knock that out. And before I hype up Yair on the fight with the Korean Zombie, I just got distracted, sorry guys. He was technically losing, like I said. He was technically losing before he got that knockout. And I have to give Rodriguez credit in the fact that he is flashy with his fighting. And I think flashiness is his main calling card here. He has some relatively strong takedowns. He's got great striking, great combinations. His jabs are pretty decent. But more importantly are his legs. He loves to go for the leg kicks. Right? And he's pretty comfortable using the leg kicks, flying knees, hook kicks. He does rare things too, like all the hook kicks and stuff like that. So I think this guy is going to come at opponents with a barrage of shots like we've seen him do in the past, which can sometimes make it difficult for his opponent to know where he's coming from. But even if he's not winning the fight, I think he has the ability to go 5 rounds. He has good cardio. it's important for him because he has all types of different athletics that he can use inside the cage. And I think that can be extremely dangerous for Stephens in the fight. So let's talk about Stephens for a minute. Stephens is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. Not looking real good for Stephens. He has a 28-16-0 pro record, and his last fight was in March of this year against Zabist. How many of you guys love Zabist? Zabit Magomed Sharipov. Let me just start by saying that in no way whatsoever do I sleep on Stephens' ability to win this fight. In no way do I sleep on that. I think he's a dangerous opponent for anyone in the division. The dude hits like a truck. All right, he's got a lot of power behind his striking, which could put some wear on Yair if he's not careful. Now, Stephens did lose to Jose Aldo and Zabist, and I know some people can't really hold the Zabit loss against him, but Aldo was a straight-up knockout in the first round. That being said, I feel that Stephens has a tendency to sometimes not be as technical with his striking as he should be against Yair, and we've seen that in some of Stephens' past fights. Now, granted, he has finished the likes of Josh Emmett, Doo-Ho Choi. We got to see Dennis Bermudez. Those were all pretty great knockouts, but also pretty insane style by Stephens. And that's not to say that he's not capable of a technical style. We saw him against Gilbert Melendez, and he used the leg kicks. That was a technical style, you know? So he can be very strategic, but it's so few and far between in Stephens' fights that it's almost difficult to assume that he's going to have some kind of strategy in his fights this weekend. He's also a pretty solid defensive wrestler, and I feel that with his tendency to be a little too emotional in fights and just coming in and sort of swinging for the fences, as Moss likes to say, I think he can definitely find himself in a pretty sticky situation on Saturday. So here's my bottom line for the main event of this evening, of Saturday evening. Stephens knows what he needs to do to set himself up for success, to put himself at an advantage against Yair Rodriguez in this fight. I believe that this could be a winnable fight for either one of them, but more importantly for Rodriguez. I think so long as he can keep himself at range with Stephens, maybe chop those legs throughout the fight, sort of break him down and avoids like any chaotic, sort of reckless striking exchanges with Stephens, because Stephens is notorious for that. If he can do that, then I honestly think that Stephens, he can work Stephens for a decision, or perhaps maybe take him out later, kind of work him out, wear him out. If he comes in recklessly, though, I think if it's in retaliation to Stephens and he comes in recklessly, that could potentially be a downfall for him, and it could set up a dangerous situation for Rodriguez. So my pick here is going to be Yair Rodriguez, but I gotta say, this was probably the toughest fight on the card to pick, because I do not sleep on Stephens. And I think that Stephens could have a lot of tricks up his sleeve that Yair is not ready for. And if he doesn't pay attention and if he's not strategic in this fight, Stephens could ultimately take the win. But my head is saying Yair Rodriguez is going to take this one. I think he's going to keep that range, and he's going to take that advantage that he knows he has by being more strategic than Stephens and not really swinging for the fences. So let me know who you guys have in the chat, Yair Rodriguez or Jeremy Stephens, and then we're going to wrap up this fight briefing. Weezing336 picks Stephens. Staleo2, thanks, bro. My pet frog made me do it. Says, I hate females talking about the sport. Well, then get the fuck out of here. What are you listening for? Heavy Microgrow says, I got Stephens. He understands that this fight might be the last in the UFC. Post resurrected Stephens by KO. Birdman Cub beating Stephens is a good measuring stick for this fight. Yair is a better version of Cub. True Grit says Stephens. Val Rodriguez. Post resurrected Stephens by KO. Drunk Savage JBH not looking to repeat this week. Ireg regardless says, I got Stephens 68%. Kainoto 74. Stephens. Henry Solstice, do you think over 3.5 rounds? Yair. That's actually a good question. So my pick for this one, I did choose Rodriguez by unanimous decision. I'd like to see some kind of finish happen in this fight. It's possible. I mean, we've seen both of these fighters finish in the past, so I would love to see a finish. But I really think that with the fighting style of both of these fighters, we might see it go the distance. I hope we get a finish, though. I do hope we get a finish. Stephens is going after his head in the first round. It will look like last week's Gaethje fight. All right, guys. that is it. That sums up your
Fight briefing.
All right. I will see you guys again tomorrow. We will be live for Fuqua Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you tune in for that. And I'm really excited to see the fights this week in UFC Mexico City, taking place in Mexico, of course. Make sure you guys tune in. Tomorrow we'll have any news or anything like that in regards to the fights to see if maybe something new happens. But other than that, those are my picks for the night. I'm actually very excited to see your guys' picks. Make sure you share this with your friends and family. Hit subscribe. Thank you to our sponsors, BetDSI, with promo code MMA-Hole. 100% bonus, as well as $25 as a welcome bonus when you sign up. Bet on your favorite fights using my picks tonight. Real Bearded Men, if you want a beard as sexy and swole as Mystic Moss, promo code MMA-Hole for 15% off. And Timeless CBD, promo code MMA-Hole, 20% off of your entire purchase. All the links to those sponsors are in the description below. Thank you guys for joining me for Fight Briefing. I look forward to seeing you again, and hopefully these picks go 6 or 5 and 5 or 6 and 6 once more. Don't be an a-hole. Be an MMA hole.